This transcript describes an incident where independent journalists were filming inside a post office in Kent, Ohio, and were confronted by postal employees and local police. The situation raises several legal and jurisdictional issues, particularly regarding the authority of local police on federal property and the rights of individuals to film in public spaces. The post office is federal property under the jurisdiction of the United States Postal Service, or USPS. Local police generally do not have automatic authority to enforce laws on federal property unless there is a formal agreement, such as a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, between the local police department and the USPS. In this case, the Kent Police Department entered the post office and issued trespass warnings to the journalists. If no MOU or similar agreement exists, the local police may have overstepped their jurisdictional authority. The primary law enforcement agency responsible for postal property is the USPS Postal Inspection Service. The journalists were exercising their First Amendment rights by filming in a publicly accessible area of the post office. According to USPS Poster 7, which outlines rules for conduct on postal property, photography for non-commercial purposes, such as news gathering, is generally allowed in public areas like lobbies, as long as it does not disrupt operations or violate privacy. The postal employees and police incorrectly claimed that the journalists were attempting to steal identities or disrupt transactions. There is no evidence in the transcript that the journalists were filming credit cards, IDs, or any sensitive information. Their activity appears to be protected under the First Amendment. The police issued trespass warnings to the journalists, threatening arrest if they returned to the post office. However, trespassing requires a lawful order to leave, and such an order must be based on a legitimate reason, like disruption of operations or violation of rules. Since the journalists were not breaking any laws or disrupting operations, the trespass warnings may have been unjustified. The journalists correctly pointed out that they were in a public space and had not committed any crime. If the police acted without proper authority or justification, the trespass warnings could be challenged in court. The police demanded that the journalists identify themselves. However, in most states, individuals are not required to provide identification unless they are suspected of committing a crime. Since no crime was committed, the demand for ID may have been unlawful. The journalists were within their rights to refuse to provide identification, and the police's threat of arrest for failure to ID could be considered an overreach. The journalists indicated their intention to hire a First Amendment attorney and pursue legal action. Potential claims could include violation of First Amendment rights like freedom of speech and press, unlawful trespass warnings, overreach of jurisdiction by local police on federal property, harassment or false accusations of criminal activity, such as identity theft. The postal employees' actions, including halting transactions and accusing the journalists of identity theft, appear to be an overreaction. Their claims were not supported by evidence and may have been an attempt to intimidate the journalists. The employees' refusal to allow transactions while the journalists were present could be seen as an unnecessary disruption of postal services. This incident highlights the tension between First Amendment rights and the authority of law enforcement on federal property. The journalists were likely within their rights to film in the post office lobby, and the actions of the postal employees and local police may have been legally questionable. If the journalists pursue legal action, the case could set a precedent for similar situations involving filming on federal property and the limits of local police jurisdiction. For further clarity, the journalist should consult with a First Amendment attorney to evaluate the specifics of the case and determine the best course of action. Additionally, they may consider filing a complaint with the USPS Postal Inspection Service regarding the conduct of the postal employees and the local police.